Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
Forecasting, particularly in relation to the wind, which is the major source of uncertainty in future energy networks. My first speaker is David Lenihan from National Grid in Wokingham, who is going to talk precisely about that topic. David, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks Dan. I've been given the difficult task of talking all about the grid and about wind power in 30 minutes, and that job is a little bit like reading the Encyclopedia Britannica backwards in the same length of time. But I'll try and show you some interesting areas, just give you a little bit of an overview to start with, and then I'm going to focus on the particular area of my expertise, which is wind power forecasting, and some of the problems that are still not yet fully solved, which I'm hoping today that I'll be able to receive some help from yourselves at solving. So with the first thing in mind, an overview of National Grid. If you're ever thinking to yourself that I'd like to know what's going on National Grid today or yesterday, then there's a particular website that will answer this question, which I'm showing you now. It's called bmreports.com. So those of you with Wi-Fi can feel free to surf that now if you like, but I'll just step you through some of the things that you'll see on this summary page. The first thing is to mention is market imbalance. What many people have a sort of a misconception that National Grid buys all the energy and sells it on and balances everything. The reality is that there's a whole electricity market that balances itself, or at least it should balance itself, but sometimes the purchasers of electricity and the people who supply electricity don't quite get the balance right, and that's what this chart is all about: market imbalance. So it's usually the wrong way up for most people, but when the market is short of energy, this chart goes positive, and usually what causes that, if a power station breaks down, or if the demand increases unusually. And most of the time the market is long, which means that they've bought more energy than they need. So I won't labour on that, but if you want to know more, I'll tell you more. The market is controlled by two prices, system sell price and system buy price. And if you imagine yourself as a generator wanting to sell your energy into the market, then you would set up contracts with the people who consume that energy. But if you find that you've overproduced, you've got extra megawatts that you need to sell, then the way the market operates, it kind of forces you to sell those extra at the system sell price. And conversely, if your generator, or more commonly, if your generator breaks down and you find you've committed to selling loads of energy, you have to purchase energy from the grid and get another supplier to supply on your behalf, and that's done at system buy price. So my point is, what I want to get across is that there's this interaction between the market and between my colleagues in the control room at Wokingham, and this is part of that. I have other colleagues, one of which is in the audience, who are demand forecasters, and their job each day is to estimate how much electricity demand is used. So the yellow curve you can see here is the demand forecast, and this green line is the metered out term up to real time. It's half-hour resolution. The electricity market works on half-hour blocks. Should have mentioned that before. So it looks as though they're pretty accurate, actually. They've got a good reputation for being within about 1%, 1.5% of accuracy. And Andrew could say more.
Standard deviation's about 0.8%.
Well, there you go. very good whichever way you look at it. Now we get onto the area that I'm more expert in, which is the wind power forecast. So it doesn't look quite so good, perhaps. I should explain, this chart is divided into three by the vertical lines, and this area is yesterday, that area is today, and this is tomorrow. And you see these numbers, again these are the settlement periods, the half-hour blocks of time that we work to in the electricity market. And the orange bars are forecasts that have been done 2 days ahead. The green bars are done a day ahead. And this brown line is the outturn. So as you can see, we're transitioning from yesterday, which was pretty moderate wind. The maximum at the moment is about 3,400. So 1,200 is quite a bit, but not record breaking. And we're transitioning to a very low period of wind. And that's because there's a high pressure system moving across the UK, which I'll show you another website that will illustrate that. So one thing to mention, and this is a very good example of it, one of the errors that we're trying to figure out how to deal with best is what we call a phase error. And as you can see, the slope of this forecast and even the forecast the day before it does line up reasonably well with the slope of the outturn, but the timing isn't quite right. And this is one of the things that we're trying to solve. Just a few other things on the overview of the grid. The chart's much easier to digest. This really puts it in perspective. This is if you look at that, the peak all the way across, that is the generation output, which, as we said before, should equal the demand as near as possible. And all the electricity in the UK is generated from a number of different sources, as you know, and we have coal at the bottom, gas, next one up, nuclear in the grey. This dark blue is a French interconnector, so we're receiving megawatts from France. We have a number of interconnectors, one to France, one to the Netherlands, and another one to Northern Ireland. And we can receive power or send power out. The orange, which you can just about see above the blue blocks, that's wind power. And as you can see, that's still a relatively small percentage of the total energy converted into electricity. And then we have some other things that are even smaller but still very important. Pump storage. You may have heard of a power station in North Wales called Dinorwig, where they have two lakes, a lake at the top of the mountain and a lake at the bottom of the mountain, and generate electricity by allowing water to flow. And during the night they pump the water back up again to store energy. So that's what we mean by pump storage. And we have hydro as a separate category to pump storage. We also have the Irish interconnector I mentioned. OCGT stands for open cycle gas turbines, as distinct from CCGT. If you don't know that, stands for combined cycle gas turbines. CCGTs are much more efficient because they're, if you imagine, they're like a jet engine where they get two opportunities to produce electricity, once when the gas goes through the jet engine and once when the exhaust gases are used to heat water, and then that water turns to steam and is put through a steam turbine. OCGTs just have the gas turbine, which means they're faster acting but much less efficient. And there's the Dutch interconnector as well that I mentioned. So that gives you an overview of the sources of energy that we have that are provided to National Grid. Just to, as a last port of call on this particular web page, we have the interconnectors. If you want to know what they did yesterday or what they're doing now, The dark blue is the French interconnector, same as the previous chart. You can see over the weekend it's very common for most of the power to be imported from France to England. So that's the zero line. So positive is import to the UK and negative is export. This blue line, this green line, sorry, it's very common for power to be sent from Scotland to Northern Ireland through the Moyle interconnector. It's not quite as large of a capacity as the French interconnector, and there's capacity to send about 500 megawatts across. The thing that we've seen recently is that the flow on the interconnectors have been driven very much by the markets. When the market price in the UK of electricity is higher than the market price in Europe, for example, the traders tend to buy cheap and sell expensive, and that promotes the flows across the interconnector, which means that suppose if we have a few difficulties in the UK, a few power stations break down, energy prices start increasing, then we would rapidly see a high correlation with that effect against the direction of the flows. So that's something we're seeing more and more of. And sometimes when the change in price is quite stark, then the change in direction is very sharp as well. And the maximum swing that we call it can be from 2 gigawatts into England to 2 gigawatts out on the French interconnector, and 1 gigawatt for the Dutch interconnector. And that can cause my colleagues in the control room some difficulty in managing what appears to be 2 gigawatts worth of megawatts injected to the network, which turns into 2 gigawatts of demand within an hour, which in that time you would need to arrange another power station or two to cover that. So that's the overview. I hope that's been useful. I'm sure that's promoted some questions in your minds. Here's what I really wanted to show you, which I hope it continues to work. This is one of the real-time displays that the control engineers, if you can imagine them in the control room right now, 24 hours a day. This is one of the screens that they have access to, and I'll just talk you through this one, because this relates particularly to wind power. It's the wind overview screen, and what we have here is for each of these wind farms. Each wind farm has a 4-letter code and a number next to it to indicate what it is, and it has a metered output, and metering is one of the problem areas that I'll talk about later. And then it has a forecast for this particular point in time, and you see the numbers just change there. They update every minute, and then we have a difference which is merely forecast minus actual, and part of my role in life to try to reduce these numbers, these differences, as much as possible. And this screen gives me the facility for ranking these in order of difference, and as you can see, the largest one is at the top, and it happens to coincide with a particular wind farm, Greater Gabbard, which is one that's increasing in size, that it's under construction as we speak. So that's one of the things I do during my working day, look at which wind farms are not being well forecasted and examining reasons why. The other thing to look at as well is these totals at the bottom. This is the total metered output in the UK at the moment, 495 megawatts. I should point out that we don't meter every single wind farm in the UK. We only measure a subset of it. At the moment it's about 2/3 of the total. So that's what that is. And the forecast for that same total set of wind farms is about 300. So we're under forecasting by that much. So that's usually we have errors of different sizes at different times. Usually when it's calm weather, as we're entering a period of calm weather, the errors reduce. But it's in stormy conditions and when the weather is chaotic and difficult to predict, that's when our errors tend to increase. And we also get those phase errors that I mentioned earlier. So, right now, I'll move on to, are there any questions at this stage? Yeah?
The particular one on this one is actually the column in the middle, the risk, loss and gain. What's that?
Ah, yes. Right. Now, the best way to explain that is, well, let me say that when we make a forecast, we don't just provide one single value for the forecast values. We provide several ranges. It's a probability forecast, and they get fed through, and we have particular percentiles of these ranges. And I think we've chosen the 80th and 20th percentiles, and that's what they represent. But we can reconfigure that depending on the needs of the control room. So, right. Okay, I'll move on to the presentation. Right, what I hope to do over the next 13 minutes is just to outline some of the problems that we've been seeing and been trying to deal with. We've done various things to solve these, but some of these problems aren't fully solved and not solved in a proper, concise way. So I'll just work straight through them. First one I'd like you to have a think about is one of the things that we have to do is we buy wind power forecasts, we buy wind speed forecasts from weather companies, such as the Met Office, and we pay a lot of money to purchase these forecasts for particular locations. As I say, they're roughly about £1,000 for each location per year, and we'd like to kind of minimise the amount that we spend, but still achieve reasonable forecast quality. So we currently have 54 locations, mainly in Scotland, for these precise weather forecasts that we get. But and at the moment, well, let me just move to the next slide and show you. This is a map of part of Scotland, the southern part of Scotland, and all these red blobs are current wind farms that are operational right now. And the process so far has been just very empirical, really. We just select these weather locations for the largest wind farms, and then for the smaller ones in the surrounding area, we tend to use that same forecast as a proxy. And that seems to work reasonably well, but I'm not sure. Is it the best way of doing it? Is there another technique? One of my colleagues suggested that we should have a look at Bayesian belief networks. There's been other suggestions, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Problem number 2. Again, my colleagues in the control room are very interested in the here and now, in what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes, the next 20 minutes. Many of our forecasts are much longer term than that, but we need to improve our capability in what's going to happen with a particular wind farm in the next half hour, and at a resolution of minute by minute. We're quite fortunate that many of the wind farms provide us with minute by minute output data, and some of which also provide us with wind speed and wind direction data. So that's a useful resource to be able to try and do some time series analysis as to examining what happened in the last hour, and try and use that in some way to predict what's going to happen in the next half hour. One of my colleagues suggested wind behaves like a fractal? I'm not sure. I'd again be very interested in your thoughts on that. This is one of the charts that one of my colleagues produced. Essentially, all it says is that the wind has a distribution like so. This is the wind speed over 2 years measured at one of the wind farms, minute by minute, and that's turned into what we call a Weibull distribution. And we want to go further with this kind of analysis. Problem number 3, assessing predictability in advance. My control room colleagues are very demanding, and not only do they want to forecast, but they want to know how accurate that forecast is ahead of time. So that's a bit of a challenge. The approach that we've taken so far is to ask the weather companies to provide us with details of their ensemble forecasts, and they provide us with a range of wind speeds that could occur at particular sites, and then we convert those wind speeds into wind power forecasts, and similarly we provide those ranges as I mentioned earlier. But my gut instinct is that there's further to go. There's more that can be done here. But the reason my colleagues are very interested in this is for these two reasons really. Holding less reserve saves money because what they have to do, if they hold reserve, they have to ask a power station to reduce its output, and with the view that at some later point in time that power station could increase at short notice if required. But also my control room colleagues are very interested in what they call system security, and if the worst happens, a transmission line should fall over or a power station should be disconnected from the transmission system, they want to be ready under all those kind of circumstances. You may still remember the high winds that blew across Scotland in December and early January. Those were difficult times for my colleagues, so they want to have every tool in the box that they can use if those sort of things should happen. This is an example of the kind of forecast that we provide them. This is for a much windier day. I think that's the 9th of March, and that's the kind of thing that we provide. This white line is the mean forecast, and these bands of different brightnesses of blue are different confidence intervals. And as I say, we produce these with the information provided by the weather companies. The other thing to mention is that when the wind picks up, some of you may already know that if the wind speed exceeds 25 meters per second at a wind farm, then automatic control systems at that wind farm will shut the farm down, because if the wind is too fast, there's a danger of damage to the turbines themselves. So this is a bit of a problem for my colleagues in the control room who like to have power stations either on or off, and not have any uncertainty about the in-between times. But unfortunately wind farms give a lot of this kind of uncertainty, and what we see here is, if I point out this percentile, this is the 10th percentile down here, you notice that it's much further and much lower down than the other ranges are, and we have an algorithm where we widen out the percentiles when the wind speed is when there's a probability that the wind speed will be around 25 meters per second. So I can give you a bit more detail about that later on, because I see I'm running out of time. Problem number 4, long-term wind forecasts. We talked about the short-term already. We've managed, in conjunction with the weather company, we've been able to forecast up to 10 days ahead. The quality of those forecasts is a little bit variable beyond 5 days, but at least the attempt is being made, and we'd like to improve those forecasts as much as we possibly can. And the reasons why are written here, because our traders can take action to reduce fossil fuel generators within areas where there's high winds, and that helps us manage our constraints and ultimately saves us money. So that's that. This is just for illustrative purposes. This is a part of the Scottish network. You see the different substations represented as thick horizontal lines. These are what we call buzz bars. The wind farms are in the light blue, and apologies for the small writing, but you can just about see Bentharsuin and can't quite read it myself. That one's Novar, Bullfruick, and Quasimire. These are all names of wind farms in Scotland that are connected to our grid that have this variable output. Right, number 5, filling in gaps for missing data. Many people come to National Grid believing that we measure everything and we have perfect metering and we have a massive database that has perfect data in it, and it's not quite true. There's all kinds of possibilities for metering systems to break down, and the communication system between the wind farm and National Grid to have some problems with it, and when all that happens we just get zeros or some fixed value in our databases, and this bad data can cause problems, especially if you're using particular mathematical techniques to forecast. So we make some attempt to identify bad data. We have quality flags that help us to do that, but they only take us so far. There's certain data that comes through that, as far as the quality indications go, it's good data, but we know that it's not very good. And I'll show you an example here on the next slide. These are 2 wind farms in the Thames estuary, very close to each other. And these snapshots were taken at the same time. I'm sure you can tell me very quickly which one of these you think is good data and which one isn't very good. So this is an extreme example to illustrate the point, but this chart here is what we call an override, when the control room engineers realise that they have bad data. They essentially type in the number to get their systems to at least perform their full calculations, and that's okay for their purposes. But when you're trying to build models of the behaviour of a wind farm using data that looks like this, then the models aren't very successful. So that's one of those things that I'd like to give you as something to think about. And the 6th and final problem I'd like to mention is an age-old problem, really. How do you measure how good a forecast is? There are many ways to do this. We've got root mean squared error, mean absolute percentage error, mean absolute error, and there's many more as well. And with probabilistic forecasts, how do you measure how good they are when someone gives you a range and your result is somewhere in the range? How do you measure how good that was? We've got some techniques that we use, one of which is called a telegram diagram, and the other one we use is ignorance score. Are there any other techniques that we can use to measure how good a forecast is? Is there a best measure of the value of a forecast? Difficult question. Never really found an answer that's fully satisfactory, but we've got somewhere close to it. This is just to illustrate. This is what we call the telegram diagram. With the this data is related to it. This is the wind speed data that the weather companies provide us with, the different ranges of different green lines. This is a 3-day period of time, and the red is the metered output. And what we do to calculate this telegram diagram is to to measure how many times the metered output lands in particular ranges. And we, like a histogram, we just plot that. And the idea is that because these ranges are at intervals of 10%, we should have roughly 10% all the way across for each range. But it's very hard to achieve the ideal.
So you forget that time dependence. You just measure frequency.
Yes, we kind of ignore the time dependence. But it's funny, my time's up. But yeah, just to finish that point, yeah, we just look over different time periods and see what the answer is. So those are the 6 problems. Hopefully I've given you enough of an overview, really, an appreciation of what National Grid does and some of the aspects that we have to grapple with each day. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for a very interesting and insightful talk. We do have time for 5 minutes for questions. I can invite those from the audience before we escape to coffee.
You can ask me over coffee as well if you like.
That's that. I have a couple. To what extent are the errors at different wind farms in forecasts correlated with each other? Because if they're not very correlated, it doesn't matter so much, but because of statistical aggregation. But if they are correlated, then obviously you've got a problem. And maybe at present, because most of the wind farms are in much the same place, they are correlated.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I've tried to analyse is that the cause of the error, and sometimes the error is caused by the fact that the weather forecast was incorrect, and that causes many of the phase errors that I mentioned. That the arrival of the weather system is earlier than forecasted or later than forecasted, and those cause the largest of our errors, and the ones I'd like to work on first. But we do have other errors that are more related to the modelling and the terrain and the complexity of the way that the wind interacts with the terrain. You see the effect sometimes at coastal areas with coastal wind farms. They're more susceptible to the sea breeze effect, and sometimes with certain weather models that's not represented as well as it could be, and sometimes you see more megawatts from a particular wind farm than you would otherwise expect. There's different causes, and some large, some other small, and they interact with each other as well, so quite complicated.
Andrew?
I feel I should know the answer to this question, but I don't. Is there any evidence that the errors at wind farms for which we are actually forecasting the wind at that point are smaller than the errors at wind farms which are close by and are using the proxy forecast?
There isn't a rigorous statistical analysis on that, but from some of the observations I've made, Greater Gabbard, for example, is using a proxy forecast, and there may be a number of reasons why the errors there are larger, to do with different types of turbines and other modelling issues, but yeah, that is using proxy. So yeah, I think
what I'm thinking is you could use that information to try and build a model that would split out the errors into modelling errors and forecast errors.
Indeed, yeah, I think that's what we should do. Thanks, Andrew. Question, man in the red?
I had a question on just on the early part. Your early diagrams showed the buy and the sell price and the difference between them.
Oh yes.
And they also showed the mismatch between supply and demand. Could you say a bit more about just how that works through? How that, for example, you presumably meet this mismatch from some other source, and does that interrelate with the gap between the buy and sell price? Or? What is the mechanism for clearing the market?
Okay, yes, very good question. I think the best way to answer it is to view this market imbalance chart in a different way, and view it as the actions that control room people need to take to put the market into balance. And essentially that's what happens. And in doing so, control engineers take actions on a least cost basis. So there's a computer system which gives them a big list of all the actions they could possibly take, cheapest at the top, and they usually take the cheapest first. And those actions are the ones that set the buy and sell prices in the market.
Because you are reflecting to the buyers and sellers the prices which will cause zero net surplus, or
I believe it's more that the imagine that the market is out of balance by say 1,000 megawatts, which it could be on a bad day. Control engineers will purchase those 1,000 megawatts from other suppliers, and cheapest first, and it's the last one that's purchased kind of sets this price. There's a little bit more to it than that, and we're at the edge of my market knowledge, I must admit, but that's the principle that it's operated on. And similar, when the market is out of balance the other way, then control engineers have to reduce plants in a similar way. Okay.
Is any
yeah,
element of lagged correlation used in you were talking about the forecasting model errors and using sort of root mean square or absolute errors and things like that.
Yeah.
But root mean square doesn't pick up a shift in distribution. You're saying one of the problems is the delay.
Yep.
So the profile shape is right, but the positioning is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So could you not identify that and the time lag at which it occurs by basically comparing the two profiles and shifting them across time and correlating them at time steps and seeing where the strongest correlation lies?
That sounds like a great suggestion. I think we should discuss that later on a few pieces of paper. But yeah, I think we haven't taken it forward due to not having the resources and having the good ideas. So maybe we can create some new ideas ourselves. Thank you. Next.
What is the frequency of the new information available about the forecast?
There are different frequencies depending on what you're after, but the most common one is the weather forecast is provided to us on an hour by hour basis, so which makes it difficult when we're trying to do very short-term, high-resolution forecasts that were discussed earlier. The metering data that we receive live from wind farms, that can be up to minute by minute, which is better. But at the moment we only forecast for hourly points and interpolate between those hours.
And the forecast, that your one forecast has hourly resolution. And there are 4 forecasts a day, each 6 hours apart.
Yeah, one more.
Perhaps you've shown those figures, but what's the ratio between the variability of the wind supply to the load uncertainty, the variability of the load?
Right. Yeah, one of my colleagues did a chart that would answer this, and I don't have it to hand. But what he did was took 1 year worth of demand data, a bit like this. You can imagine that extending for a whole year, and then he subtracted the wind output from that to see what the highest ramp would be, the sharpest ramp, and he scaled up the wind output to 20 gigawatts because that's where our targets are leading us, that we'll have at least 20 gigawatts installed on our system by 2020, and the effect that had seemed to be slightly scary, but the curve, the resultant curve, was very much more fluctuating, and that's one of the issues maybe in future years I'll be coming and presenting about here. Okay.
Can I ask one quick, further, not
Yeah.
quite scientific question, maybe, but what is the value of better wind forecasting if you could have it relative to the present situation? Suppose you could imagine that you had perfect forecasting and you didn't have problems.
Mm-hmm.
How much money in GB per year could you save in terms of, say, reserve setting costs, which I guess is would be the main saving?
Ballpark.
Order of magnitude.
Ballpark figure would be somewhere, I hesitate to guess, but it would be about in the region of 50 to 100 million pounds per year. I don't know, Andrew may have better figures than that, but if we had perfect forecasts for wind output, we could treat every wind farm as if it were fully reliable, and every time the day ahead forecast, if it said 100 megawatts coming from a particular wind farm, we could believe in every megawatt of that. And then we wouldn't have to hold part loaded any other plant. But we spend many millions holding reserve. But at the same time, it's not as easy to answer it directly as that, because we also hold reserve for other purposes. In case a large nuclear power station might break down, we need to hold reserve for that possibility anyway. So the costs are not as easy to break down as you might imagine.
Sure, but
Can you just show us the system-wide prices?
Yeah, certainly. So
Yeah.
one more.
Did you think of using leading indicators for weather forecasts, like the weather? I mean, an error in forecast. If you're a sailor, you know the wind never comes when it's expected. It comes earlier or later.
Yes.
But if you can know the weather in the direction where the wind comes from, you know when it will come. So you could improve forecasts by having leading indicators of the weather. For example, in Ireland, being an indicator of what happens in Scotland or in Norway.
Oh, indeed. Well, one of the things we do as well, let me just quickly show you. If it works. We do look directly at the weather charts as well, just to get an idea of what the weather situation is. And one of those websites is called XE Weather, that we spend time looking at. And that does give that kind of indication, exactly as you say, that the wind does pick up in Ireland before it picks up in Scotland. Fortunately, I'm having some problems with the Wi-Fi here, but you just have to imagine a map of the UK with the wind speeds on it, and that's what we're looking at.
Okay, David, again, thank you very much. That's a lot of very interesting questions, which I'm sure will get taken on in conversations during the day. We should stop and have a 10-minute coffee break, and then we'll ring the bell so that you know when to come back. Okay, Dave, thank you very much.